So we've tested 3 laptops up to now for video editing. First one, the ASUS 14X OLED, which is about $1,500 for thin and light, kind of on the go, but still OLED and a lot of creative features in there. Then we stepped it up to ASUS ZenBook Pro 14, a 14-inch laptop with a 4070 in there, and we got quite a bit more performance. Then we stepped into another league, 2.7K laptop here. This is the HP Omen 16 2023 model, and this has the i7 13700HX and an RTX 4080 in here, and that did absolutely amazing for video editing. But now we're gonna step it into a completely different league. Now, this is not actually a more expensive league. In my opinion, you get the most for your money. This is the ASUS ProArt Studiobook 16 2023 model with i9 13980HX CPU, which boosts up to 5.6 GHz and has 24 cores on a laptop so small. It also has an RTX 4070, and I have upgraded the RAM and SSD on this laptop. And now this laptop has 64 GB of DDR5, and it's got a secondary 4TB SSD, which is the Kingston KC3000 4TB SSD. It's absolutely amazing and still not quite as expensive as the HP Omen. So let's take a look if better CPU is better than the better GPU. So this is going to be interesting.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out Whokeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
So if you're not familiar with these video editing tests or applications of what I'm doing, then there's lots of other things you can look at as well. In here we can see what is actually going to be a bottleneck as well. Well, we're going to have the task manager open here. You can see which media engines and encoders we're going to be using, as well as hardware information. So we can see how much wattage did we pull, what happened here during this test. So let's start. We're going to start with this 4K clip. By the way, 4K is going to be the minimum that we're going to be doing. And as you can see, we have it on full resolution. We're also going to be putting this dropped frame indicator on here, which will show us if we have dropped any frames during the playback. So full resolution, let's take a look. This will be accelerated on the iGPU. As you can see, the decoder, and it is very, very good right now. Timeline clicking through is very, very good. Scrubbing is buttery smooth as well. And if you press play, here's your 264, 8-bit 420, 60 frames per second. So this is what you usually see on a mirrorless camera, like 60 frames per second, 4K. And it plays it back no problem. As you can see, the Intel UHD is playing this back. No problem. Moving on to H.265, 420, 24 frames per second. This is 10-bit footage now though, and still extremely buttery smooth. I'd say like as good as it gets on any desktop. So absolute powerhouse for this here, no problem. Bear in mind, I do have an adjustment layer on there as well, so that will put a little bit of stress on the GPU as well. So we're not just stressing the CPU or GPU, but both at the same time. It plays back the color grade there. This 30 frames per second 422 10-bit H.264 is going to be accelerated on the CPU, and this is extremely smooth. As you can see, the CPU is 100%. All of the cores are there kicking in. The laptop fans are spinning up. We're probably pushing how many watts through with thermal throttle, but 141 watts we pushed. And as you can see, we've pushed up to 5.6 GHz as well. No problem. Next of all, 25 frames per second, H.264, 25 frames per second, 10-bit 422. So this is again on the CPU, but the timeline is very smooth. Clicking through everything is just absolutely like no problem. I have nothing bad to say. Even this SI clip, all intra clip, just buttery smooth. I can really feel that the CPU is very, very powerful. There's a lot of cores, a lot of power that the CPU can handle, and I can really feel it. Moving on to 60 frames per second, H.264 10-bit 422. So this is, again, software accelerated on the CPU. First of all, scrubbing through the timeline, you can see that the CPU kicks up to 100%. It's quite doable. It's not as smooth as some of the hardware accelerated codecs, but pretty much as good as it can get. And let's press play. Now, interestingly, look at that. It can play back 0 frames dropped. Some of the lower end laptops here weren't able to play that back. Perhaps because the GPU couldn't keep up, or the CPU couldn't keep up. But in this case, it seems like that is not a problem. Now, H.265, 60 frames per second, 420. So this is going to be accelerated on the iGPU. So you can see this video decode. I'll put this video decode one as well, so you can see, okay, that one is playing this back. If we're just scrubbing through, it's pretty good. We haven't dropped any frames anywhere right now. The hardware acceleration, the quick sync really helps here. Pressing play, it's buttery smooth, 0 frames dropped. I have absolutely no issues there. Now this is 422 60 frames per second 4K footage, which means that if you don't have Intel QuickSync, this is absolutely gonna kill your machine. But look at that, this is so buttery smooth in here. And if you see right now, we are using 31 gigs of RAM, okay, 33 gigs of RAM. So as you can see, 32 gigs of RAM will be the bottleneck of your system, and I can really feel it here. The 64 gigs really help this laptop. It's just incredibly powerful. This is Canon C200 RAW now, and we're stepping up to this now and looking at the RAW codecs as well. This is DCI 4K, so a little bit wider than your UHD. Scrubbing through is just very smooth, and let's press play. Okay, this is the first codec that we're struggling to play back really, and we're dropping some frames. So if we're going to press play, as you can see, it can't quite play this back. It's only dropped 8 frames though, and it doesn't continuously keep dropping these frames. This is very interesting. It does take some time to get going, but then look at that. Second time now. 0 frames dropped. Very interesting. 2 of these clips on top of each other. And look at that. It is playing back now. Okay, we dropped a few frames here now. Yeah, we're dropping frames now. But I'd say it's doable. Bear in mind, this is full resolution DCI 4K RAW from Canon C200. It's not an easy codec to play back. Red RAW, 4K Red RAW, 24 frames per second, incredibly smooth, like as good as it can get. This is 120 frames per second. Firstly here, this is 420 8-bit H.264, and it is very smooth, very buttery smooth. As you can see, the Intel decoder is playing this back. This is 422 10-bit, 120 frames per second. And this will be played back on the CPU. As you can see, CPU is 100%. Now this is full resolution. I kind of think no one would be editing it like that. Full resolution, you'd probably be struggling playing it back. Like, you can see it playing back, even though this is not playing all of the frames back. As you can see, we're dropping quite a few frames, because I think the media engine only goes 60 hertz or 60 frames per second basically, so that's why it can't play back all of these frames here. But what we can see is very smooth. Perhaps it's playing back every other frame. This is 420 10-bit 120 frames per second, and you can see the iGPU is the one that's playing this back. It's doable. And now 422 10-bit, so this is something that your iGPU can play back as well, because it's H.264 422 10-bit 120 frames per second. It's doable. Now it's not perfect, and I'd probably suggest editing this at quarter resolution, some of these codecs will be better, but surprisingly it's not that much better even at quarter resolution, just because it's probably a lot of frames to push through. All of the previous laptops struggled with this codec. This is 5K Red RAW. Let's press play. Yeah, so we are dropping, oh wait a second, we dropped 8 frames and then nothing. Let's try this again. Oh wow, and that's why you need 24 cores in a laptop. Look at that. 5K Red RAW, full resolution, played back. I know CPU is 100% utilized, but 0 frames dropped. Okay, if you're getting RAW and 5K and higher resolutions, look at that. That's incredible. Let's try 6K Red RAW with the color grade. Let's press play. Yeah, we're dropping frames. We're not playing this back fully here. Scrubbing through is kind of okay, slightly laggy. This is red Komodo now, these PC part clips. The scrubbing is a little bit better. Let's press play here on the Komodo. Okay. That's 1 frame dropped, which is very, very good. So scrubbing is quite good actually, full resolution, 6K Red RAW. I think it's completely editable. If we're putting it to quarter resolution, oh, just like no problem. Feel free to edit 6K RAW, Red RAW on your laptop. So this is B-RAW 6K. Obviously scrubbing extremely good, but playing it back is good as well. It's quite easy to play back. B-RAW isn't the hardest codecs to play back there. As you can see, with color grade, 0 frames dropped, and it's very, very smooth. 2 B-RAWs on top of each other. Playing back, absolutely no problem. CPU is 100% max there. And now 6K, 3 6K B-RAW clips on top of each other. Okay, now we started to lose 4 frames, but still very powerful for a laptop. This is Canon R5 8K footage. And if we're scrubbing through, this is half the resolution. I'm not going to even put it at full resolution because that has clogged every single PC, even like a Threadripper PC, like this one behind me. Have you seen the Oppenheimer PC build?
They won't fear it until they understand it.
Well, go check it out. It's worth checking out. Half the resolution, very, very good. And playing back, it's okay. Like, we've dropped a few frames, 13 frames. It's completely doable. Like, it doesn't annoy my eyes, like losing some of these frames here. It's fine. If I put it to quarter resolution, the timeline is extremely smooth, and when playing back, it just does wonders and there's no problems. So perhaps when editing this 8K footage, go to half or quarter of resolution. Okay, let's try full resolution Red RAW 8K now. 3, 2, 1, go. Not quite. Like, scrubbing and clicking through is quite okay. In fact, very, very good, like completely doable. But then when you press play to see like perhaps the full composition back, it's struggling a bit. If we put it to quarter resolution, oh, the scrubbing is so smooth. Plays back absolutely no problem here as well. 12K B-RAW, quarter of resolution, scrubbing at quarter resolution, quite laggy. Press and play. Interestingly, this is not happening. So then we've looked at all of the codecs, and I'd say I'm quite surprised because the 64 gigabytes of RAM helped a lot. The 24 cores actually really help with some of the RAW codecs and higher than 4K codecs as well. So if you really want a laptop that can edit some of the RAW codecs on the go, has ton of power, ton of GPU power to keep up with the color grade here as well, then this is definitely a very interesting laptop. And to be honest, I'm quite surprised. Now, the 4K clips, most of them were about the same as the HP Omen, but this ProArt, what it did better was when you had a software accelerated codec, perhaps 422 H.264, 60 frames per second, 10-bit, then that was playing it back better on the ProArt just because of the 24 cores, the extra cores, they did make a difference. But now let's take a look how much RAM did we actually use. The physical memory we used 42 gigs max on this test. So you can see that this laptop was bottlenecked by RAM, and it could have done even better if we had bigger capacity. In terms of core clock speeds, we reached 5.6, almost 5.6 gigahertz. The CPU hit 99 degrees. We did thermal throttle. Let's have a look which cores thermal throttled. In fact, all of them thermal throttled because we've really pushed everything to it, because some of the raw codecs you have to have a ton of CPU power to actually push this through. As you can see, we pushed 156 watts through, which is insane power for 99 watts, but it did the best kind of out of all of this test there. When we're looking at the NVIDIA GPU, the GPU pulled max about 80 watts and hit 74 max temperature. And interestingly, a GPU memory allocated, we literally used all of the 8 gigabytes of the RTX 4070 there, which was 7,850 megabytes. So only 150 megabytes was left for something else. So it could be a bottleneck there for this. But there is one more thing that we want to do, which is the export test, okay? We've done the export test on the previous machines, and so far the HP Omen with the RTX 4080 is leading because it does have dual encoders on the GPU, which for exporting really is good, because it can render the top frame and bottom frame of the footage at the same time and then splice it together kind of in the end of the render at the same time, which makes it up to twice as fast as something that has a single encoder. I am gonna zero this or reset the hardware info now again, because then we can see if we were using more RAM or how did our hardware react to the export settings here, and then go. Let's see how well is this export gonna do, and if it's gonna do it faster than the Omen or some of the ZenBook Pros. Right now, we're looking at 29 minutes. That's probably not as good as the Omen, but we'll see. Now, interestingly, memory use, the maximum RAM we used to export this was 37 gigabytes, which means that the 32 gigabytes isn't that big of a bottleneck, but still is a little bit. Now, in terms of clock speeds, as you can see, we've hit 5.6 gigahertz on some of the P cores, and in terms of the core temperature, it was quite hot, 98 degrees. On a laptop, that's quite all right. Let's have a look at thermal throttling, and yeah, all of those cores thermal throttled. So the thermal solution for this ASUS Studiobook isn't that amazing for this killer of a CPU. Now, there's 24.5 degrees in this room right now, so it's not the coldest, not the warmest, but in this configuration, it was struggling to keep all of these cores fully utilized, actually under caps. But you can see we're pushing 157 watts through this as well, which is ridiculous power on a laptop. Now think about this, 157 watts. That's more than the Ryzen 5950X desktop CPU. It's crazy, crazy power. Like anything from Ryzen 5000 series wasn't as, power hungry as this laptop CPU there, but there's 24 cores, so it does make a difference there a little bit. The graphics cores got up to 5 watts there for some of the decoding or encoding, so we've literally hit the power limit of 157 what it's been set. Now interestingly, even the RAM here, looking at the DDR5 one, this is bank one was 95.8 degrees. That's quite hot. Then the secondary one is 79.8. So probably the 95 dim stick is the one that's between the motherboard and the secondary dim stick, because that will get quite warm, as you might have seen there. GPU, we hit 78 degrees in GPU temperature. The memory junction was 84 degrees. Hotspot was 88.9. It's kind of all right on a laptop where we put in 105 watts maximum for the GPU. Quite crazy power. And as you can see, the GPU memory allocated, we literally used everything. 7.9 gigabytes of the RAM, and we're gonna get to that in a moment. So then let's take a look at these results, and we exported this in 24 minutes and 58 seconds and 24 minutes and 44 seconds. So that secondary pass was a little bit faster. And is it as fast as this Omen? Not really. The 4080 is able to do it 5 minutes faster. Literally 20 minutes and 40 seconds or something like that, what we got on the Omen. So as you can see, this 4070 on this laptop is actually a bottleneck. Now, I wish this ProArt Studiobook would actually have a 4080 or 4090 version as well, just because of the dual encoders. Now, 4070 is a great GPU, and I think it's great for this price point. This is only $2,500. Looking at everything you're getting, the screen, the touchscreen, it's crazy. The bag, the ASUS pen, everything you get for it, it's a crazy good price for a laptop. You go have a look at some of the other ones, some of the gaming laptops out there, you'll see this is a very, very good price for it. But I do wish that there was a 4080 version for those who are video editing and on the go. They really want this, even if it's exactly the same thermal package and thermal limit as the 4070. We'd still love dual encoders, and the more of the CUDA cores and the more VRAM, the 12 gigabytes of VRAM would be better. Now, I know this is the highest end professional laptop GPU and laptop model that ASUS provides. We're not actually getting more VRAM than some of the mid-range ASUS ZenBook Pro, for example, 8 gigabytes, and then the same 8 gigabytes in here. I think we should be getting more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM in a professional high-end creator laptop like this ProArt Studiobook is focused at. And as you can see, the second place goes for this Studiobook ProArt laptop here. But the interesting thing is, if we actually upgraded the RAM on the Omen, it would get even faster, because as you can see, we used 37 gigabytes of RAM, but the Omen only had 32 gigabytes of RAM. So even with less RAM, the GPU was overpowering the more RAM and was faster than this Studiobook 16. Now, in conclusion, which one of those is the best laptop now then in this series? Which one would I pick for video editing on the go? And interestingly enough, I actually probably recommend this ProArt Studiobook 16 the most. There's a few things that are above everything else in this pack. First of all, the CPU performance is the best. Now, the exporting isn't the best compared to the HP Omen, but there's other things that actually make this laptop, to me, much better than the rest of them. First of all, the 16-inch display, which is 2.8K display, OLED display, high resolution, very good contrast ratio, and obviously beats Omen day and night, 120 Hz OLED. It's absolutely fantastic. Much better color rendition, color space, color accuracy, everything's better. Plus, the 16:10 aspect ratio will be much better for you for video editing than the HP Omen. Now, the ZenBooks have the same aspect ratio, but still, even though the Omen has more power, this one was better. Now, the 64 gigabytes and the ASUS dial and the haptic touchpad, all of these things make this laptop much better experience interacting with content, working with content than the HP Omen. If you want just a workstation that you carry around and you just plug in and you have your own screen and perhaps your own keyboard using like a secondary keyboard, then the whole Omen is more powerful than this ProArt. But at 32 gigabytes of RAM, the ProArt is actually cheaper than this HP Omen. Now, I know this has 4080 and this has 4070, but this ProArt has a lot of other features. The OLED screen, the dial pad here, the contrast ratio, the battery life, the experience, build quality, touchscreen. All in all, I think if you're looking for a high-end creator laptop, the ProArt Studiobook is actually a very, very good option. And perhaps even if we're losing a little bit on the export, I think on the timeline, actually video editing series, as you saw here, the ProArt was the best out of them all because of the more RAM, better CPU performance. So when you're actually working with the content, it's much better. And this timeline scrubbing with this dial pad, you'll probably love it even more on the go when you're using this. So I'm going to put the win for this ProArt Studiobook. The second place I'm going to give to this Omen if you just want the pure power, and the pure power is just insane on this HP Omen because of the 16 cores and RTX 4080. That's pretty crazy. The third place, very close tied with the HP Omen, is the ZenBook Pro 14 OLED because it's a much smaller package. It still offers like a lot of the performance that you'll get on the ProArt book. You can still upgrade the RAM a little bit more, but it's much smaller. You get the touchscreen, better screen, a little bit smaller screen. So it's very, very good. And then the last place is this ZenBook 14X OLED. Even though this wasn't the best in terms of video editing out of these laptops, don't get me wrong, the budget 14X OLED there for $1,500 is fantastic for 4K editing and 1080p editing. The 3050, yeah, is a little bit weak in some of the cases, but if you just want to do simple editing or editing vlogs where you're not getting very complicated and you have just simple 8-bit 4K footage, 30 frames, 25 frames, even 120 frames, making proxies or lowering the timeline resolution, it's completely doable with this $1,500 laptop there. And bear in mind, you still get OLED and touchscreen on there, which is just a fantastic thing to interact with content. So all in all, they're kind of all good laptops in their own kind of category or their own way of what they're, you know, meant for. But if I had to choose one, I'd kind of have to choose two, because if I wanted the best power on the go, this 16-inch is amazing. But if I wanted something small and light, I very much like that 14X OLED. I know this is not the most powerful one, but for the budget, and in this house, I seem to use that one a lot just when doing emails, or just because it's light, small, very powerful, and interacting with content is still very, very good. So if you want to pick up any of these laptops, then check them out in the description below. I'm going to leave them down there. If you do want me to check out any other things, then leave a comment below. I'm probably not going to do a video for DaVinci Resolve unless I get annoyingly large amount of comments in the comment section below. Then perhaps we can do DaVinci Resolve as well, but they will be a bit more close there. But if you're a creator and you're wondering what's the best bang for buck creator PC, perhaps you want to build yourself one and you don't want to waste any money and you want just the best performance for your money, then check out the build guides in the description below. Whatever your budget is, there's one video down there. I'll explain everything down there. You go and check it out. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.